The following is a multimedia rendition of a post found on the delvercollective.com. For more Xaxa River Valley and all things TTRPGs, check out that site. Welcome back to Xaxa River Valley. Last session, Bashir offered a golden time-traveling orb in exchange for the Princess Quintessa. Quintessa is heiress and rightful queen to the throne of Capricos. Her uncle had rallied her bannermen under false claims so he could trade her in Torrens for something more valuable than the orb. Under the guise of machine prospectors, the party lied to Bashir and told him Quintessa was seen joining the solar host east of Xaxa River. She was, after all, a self-proclaimed follower of Nucleos. Bashir sent outriders into the foothills to verify the PC's claims while taking the party into his camp so they could show him the way to the churchly procession. Let's drop in. That morning, a guttering sun staggered into its place in the sky. Great patches of darkness splotched across that fiery face like spilled ink upon parchment. Doghide Kobek, Murzir the Alchemist, and the thief Altair awoke in Capricosian battle tents. They were here on a lie, but were committed no less and could no longer effectively leave. As they stepped into the dim red glow of morning, their breath came in fog. The air was chilled. Gooseflesh bit at their skin. Seeing them emerge, Bashir quickly roused them to action, leaving no time to dwell on the obvious temperature drop and darkening of the sun. Onward they rode, chaperoned by Bashir and his 70 camel riders, eastward toward Xaxa River to meet the solar host. Bestrode upon their own mounts, some mixture of camel and riding lizard, our party whispered worriedly of unsure plans to get out of this mess. They spoke of somehow turning the Capricosians against the Solar Church so they could slip away. Regardless, they were shackled and in a tight spot. After a day and a night of travel, the two factions met. Bashir's camel riders formed two ranks that stretched the western banks of Xaxa River to some effect. Eastward, the vast solar host assembled itself into battle groups, 10 groups of 10 acolytes, each 10 group led by an ecclesiarch. They themselves had many dozens of tents pitched and of cumbersome quality. Though they were great in number, this church traveled at a snail's pace. Now that they were in visual range, the party finally got eyes on the vast machine the solar priest dragged all this way, here through the sand. It was the entire sun shrine, the very same laser that unearthed their own titan. It appeared disassembled, and with careful scrutinization, Murzir gathered this machine could be plugged directly into the head of their own titan as a second weapon. Surely this was the church's intention. Bashir summoned them forth and approached the western bank of Xaxa River with a group of camel guard. The head priest of the church met him on the eastern bank, and so began a back-and-forth bickering. They shouted at each other from across the river for a while, before someone suggested they go into the camp and see for themselves that Quintessa was not there. The camel guard detachment, with Bashir and the party, crossed the river and did just that. Obviously, Quintessa was being kept in the war machine, but the party played along, peeking into tents and speaking with acolytes in a false search. The head priest repeatedly assured Bashir the princess was not there. Bashir's eyes saw it to be true. "Bah! I have no patience for petty games. Kill these fools!" he screamed, spittle flying. The Capricos outriders formed a circle of camels round the party, slowly advancing with their spears in killing position. The PCs were done for. Then came the Night Angel. It first began with an earth-shaking horn reverberating from the sky, paralyzing everyone present. The heavens swirled with unearthly darkness as a series of rotating rings began to take geometric shape, blotting out the stars. One by one, darksome eyes flickered open upon the icy bands of metal, and the night angel saw them all upon the ground. Its dark core rippled unnaturally, suggesting the blackness on the other side was not of earthly skies. The thing descended from above to hang over Xaxa River Valley, and everywhere it passed, rapidly forming glaciers froze over, covering the land in black ice. Unnatural darkness hung over the aberrant rime, and troublesome things writhed in the shadow. Transfigured as every man was, gazing upon the night angel caused terrible headaches, as human eyes weren't meant to perceive lower dimensional entities. Each in the party had to save versus paralysis. Murazir and Kobek sunk back upon their mounts in inaction, transfixed as they were. Only Altair was free to flee. Panic, of course, had overtaken both armies. People from both factions were fleeing in all directions as the Night Angel came. In the fright of terror, a bloody melee broke out as the crowds blocked each other off from crossing the river safely. Rather than roll initiative, we just started with Altair since he made his save. First, I had him roll 1d4 to determine how many rounds till the thing swept over their position, and it was game over for everyone still, quote-unquote, on screen. The gods were good, and he got a 4. Springing into action, he quickly shook Kobek from his stupor. Bashir made his save, and aptly fled upon his bleeding camel. The thief shook Murazir awake, who attempted to blind Bashir with conjured light, but was resisted in the chaos. Luckily, Kobek retrieved an acolyte's burning spear and hurled it through the camel. Bashir fell to the sand before he made it to the river. Kobek's dog Rosh leapt at his throat, but received a blade wound in return, yelping in pain. Kobek ran up and finished Bashir with a spear through the gut. He retrieved the second golden orb and a little scroll message in a pouch at Bashir's waist as men fled all around. Meanwhile, Altair and Murazir were looting the priestly caravan, nervously watching the approaching Night Angel. Altair tried to find a way to move the Great Sun Shrine, but the 12 camels, lashed sled-like, were panicked and uncoordinated. Instead, he found the corpse of an ecclesiarch. Rather than spending time rifling through his pockets, he cut the priest's entire belt free and took all his pouches. He asked me what kind of stuff was in there, but I really wasn't sure. I told him it was some undefined holy symbols and jewelry, but that we'd flesh it out between sessions. Another quick GM tip here. If players loot somebody but you're not really sure what exactly that person had, you can give them vague items like priestly treasures bundled up in regal silks, and straight up tell them you're not sure on the details of that item yet, but between sessions you'll work out the exactitudes. It's okay to be upfront with players. The game is always living. You can go in and twiddle and tweak the switches, especially for the first few sessions. This works really great when you're still getting a feel for a new group, which all of these players were total strangers before we started playing Xaxa River Valley. Anyways, Murazir ducked inside a tent and found a priestly chest containing another battery for their boarding axe. The Solar Church was bearing gifts for the Titan after all. There wasn't much time now. The Night Angel was nearly upon them, so the party mounted up and ran westward across the river, back into the foothills. At this point, we did a scene shift. Endry Mortas was with us during the session for this whole time. You may recall his lost eyes. We cut to Endry Mortas' perspective inside the orange jelly. His body was resting in one of those save-state cryopods mentioned in the 3rd episode, Convergence. When in this dreamlike state, he was at one with the machine and felt the silvered hull as though it were his own skin. The war machine was standing in a great pit now, but ultimately freed. Solomon's mirror and the laborers of Pern were used to great effect. Speaking of Solomon, he and his acolytes lay dead outside the buried Titan. Their slayers were the 10 Capricosian camel riders Bashir sent to scour the hills, alongside the sorcerer Alkamar. By now, they too saw the Night Angel descending from the heavens, and were climbing up to the Titan's cave-headed entrance with haste. Any lingering fear of the ancient machine dissolved. Endry Mortas felt these interlopers climbing upon the metal and was roused from his meditative slumber. Blindly, but by memory, he swam his way down through the orange jelly, dropping through the junction corridor and into the control room. Slowly, carefully sidling his way around the edge of the control room pit, he made his way to the rose-shaped pilot seat. He pulled himself into it, and when comfortably seated, the quadrant of needles projected from the seat and interfaced with the back of his spinal column. He gained control. The first 2 Capricosian riders to reach the top bickered between themselves who should go first before diving into the orange jelly together. Down they swam, eventually finding the hatch that led into the junction chamber. As they dropped into the room, assisted by the gentle help of pseudopods, Endry Mortas locked all 3 doors leading from here. He then asked me, "Is there any way I can weaponize the jelly to burn them like acid?" This was a completely awesome idea, so I let him make an improvised attack using his own stats against the 2 invaders. They were, of course, freaking out in terror, as the weird jelly tendrils lashed out like daggers to try and skewer them. One man fought back the orange goo, while the other tried to pry open one of the doors leading to the blast ray halls. Meanwhile, the rest of the party arrived in the hills outside. Kobek immediately charged in and trampled over Alkamar, breaking any spells he held and incapacitating him. Murazir summoned magical darkness to blind the Capricosians still outside trying to get in. Endry Mortas, sensing his friends outside, shifted the Titan so it would be easier for them to jump inside. There was an awesome scene where the camel riders were all using grappling hooks to climb into the mouth of the machine, and Kobek swung his halberd like Sinbad, chopping ropes to send them tumbling into the rocky pit. By hook and by crook, the party got inside the war machine. Altair and Murazir dropped down through the jelly to kill the invaders. After quickly dispatching them, they moved to take up position throughout the Titan. Surely this was the only way they could possibly stand a chance against the coming Night Angel. Speaking of, at this point I had them roll another 1d4 to see how many rounds they'd have to prepare before its arrival. The gods had forsaken them. This time it was a 1. Altair rushed into the blade of the boarding axe and strapped himself in. Endry Mortas stayed plugged into the pilot's chair, seeing the blocky landscape through the machine fuzz and feeling more than seeing. Kobek manned the computer that aimed the blast ray. Murazir manned the computer that swung the boarding axe. Quintessa stayed aboard the control center, ready to help where needed. When everyone was in position, Endry Mortas willed the machine up and out of the pit. The Titan pulled itself from the earth to stand strong and tall, nearly 100 feet of silvered metal reflecting with the last rays of ruby-red sunlight. So begun the battle with the Night Angel. I ended up running this thing as a scaled-up, low-level D&D battle. Here are a couple of MechWarrior Titan Battle homebrew rules that I slapped together before the session. Titan HP is like character HP, but scaled up times 10. This is a rule I pulled from Fantasy Flight Games' Star Wars RPG. Only Titan-sized weapons affect THP. Their war machine had 12 THP. Crew stations. This is what each PC could do on their turn. The pilot could move the Titan. The blast ray station allowed a user to spend their move to get a +4 to aim, and their action to fire the blast ray itself. The blast ray was really only safe to fire once per day. They could fire it as many times as they wanted, but each time they shot, beyond the first, the critical failure range increased by 1. For example, if I shoot the blast ray a second time, it critically fails on a d20 roll of a 1 or a 2. This was really inspired by the cleric rules from DCC. After the blast ray is fired, Someone had to use their action to manually reset it by venturing inside the cannon itself. This responsibility ultimately fell to Quintessa. In the same way as the blast ray, the boarding axe had its own station that required somebody to spend an action to actually swing it from inside the control room. The Night Angel itself had a set of wounds, which were different from THP. Really, it just represented hits from Titan weapons. If the party could hit the Night Angel 3 times, regardless of if it was with the blast ray or the boarding axe, they would destroy it. I gave the Night Angel an armor class of 15, and it had a few special moves. So it could shoot a ray of cold, where the pilot would have to make a save versus paralysis. Otherwise, the Titan would lock up as the servos froze over, and they would get a -2 to any action. The Night Angel could also enter the same space as the Titan, forcing the pilot to make save versus paralysis. The Titan would then take a D10 of T damage on failure. Remember, they only have 12 HP. With that in mind, here's what happened. Right out of the gate, Kobek locks in an attack vector for the blast ray, and they let it rip. They hit on an 18. A superheated wave of invisible fire rolled forth from the cannon with blinding fury. Sound was sucked away as the charge depressurized the air surrounding the war machine, like Jango Fett dropping depth charges in Attack of the Clones. Arcing energy tore through the Night Angel and blasted a rend into the rings. Where the wound shattered, reality leaked away like wispy smoke, swirling into cosmic miasma. The blast revealed a dark core in the depth of the Night Angel. 2 more wounds to go. At this point, it retaliated with a withering beam of glacial frost. I had Endry Mortos save versus paralysis once more. He failed and the servos of the Titan began to lock up. All their actions would have -2 until they dealt with the unearthly ice. The Night Angel then moved forward to overtake them. Kobek sent Quintessa into the blast ray to reset it. Then they prepared to fire off another volley. This time, they rolled low, and the blast ray went streaking off into the sky, harmlessly missing the Night Angel. We saw this from the perspective of the great throng of pilgrims that were watching the Cyclopean battle from the wastes, slack-jawed. The Night Angel overtook the war machine, moving into their space. From the outside, it looked as though the darksome gate was consuming the war machine from the top down. Inside, they struggled to maintain a foothold in the material plane, as the systems overloaded with massive damage. I had Endry Mortos save versus paralysis once more. On a failure, they took a terrifying D10 T damage. Luckily, I only rolled a 2. Murazir fired off the boarding axe and it swung through lower dimensional matter, cleaving an even greater wound in the unreality. By now, the darksome core at the center of the Night Angel was unraveling with matter, revealing a vulnerable physicality inside. Only 1 more wound now. Unfortunately, the party took another automatic D10 T damage since the Night Angel was still in their space. I rolled an 8. They only had 2 THP left. Endry Mortos asked if he could somehow vent the blast ray's superheated coolant in an effort to shove the Night Angel back and out of their space. He rolled high, and it was so. The Night Angel was driven back as the spraying liquid melted ice from the blasted rings. I like to give players what they want in exchange for some setback. I ruled expelling this much coolant increased the critical failure range by 1 for the blast ray. Now it would explode, causing critical damage to everyone if they rolled a 1, 2, or 3 on the next blast ray attack. This steaming spray from the blast ray also removed their -2 frosted servos penalty, freeing them up for the final blow. Murazir waited for the perfect moment, then released the boarding axe once more. This time, it struck at the dark core of the Night Angel and held fast into solid matter of alien origin. We cut over to Altair. He was in one of those ancient eggshell astronaut armor suits, harnessed in the boarding axe. There was a crazy GoPro shot looking over his shoulder as the blades swung like that crazy centrifuge G-force training machine. The blast door slid open, and darksome antimatter leaked into the boarding axe. The harness released and Altair stood up. Beyond the door was a small room, well, more of a cavity carven from black stone, rippling with static. Altair approached and saw the stone formed a crude altar, atop which rested an obsidian object, menhir-like and loathsome as all hell. Of course, he ran up and touched it. The second his gloved fingers met the object, lightning flashed inside his skull, and troubling voices filled his mind with foreboding things to come. He didn't remember stumbling back into the boarding axe. As the final wound was struck, the Night Angel folded in upon itself, drawing all the warmth from the surroundings in its death throes. When the black hole had eaten itself, all that remained was the desolation of its passing and mile-wide sheets of steaming black ice. By then, the people of Pern had fled south to Torrens or joined the throngs marching northward. Many had seen the battle and rushed forth to lavish their saviors with praise and thanks. At this point, we all took a breath. Then I told them the Night Angel was a harbinger of the Earth Eater and that there were many more like it. This marked the beginning of the end. They'd have roughly 1 week before the darkening, so now they must prepare for the final fight. The Titan was beat to hell with 2 out of 12 Titan HP, an overloaded blast ray, and no more boarding axe swings. They used the original charge and the one Mirazir found at the priest's camp. Luckily, no PCs died in the chaos. Kobek also got a chance to read Bashir's scroll. Altair's old guild was offering Bashir 3 golden time orbs in exchange for Quintessa. Why was she so valuable? The party discussed this, especially delving into Altair's past a bit. We came to find this guild burned Altair in a deal involving a golden orb, and he was left for dead. That was where we ended this session. It was pretty wild for 2.5 hours. I thought they would head to Torrens to find some more answers about the guild, but they ended up going to Castle Crater to smash it open and see what the Tyrant King was experimenting on in his sandstone catacombs. This campaign has been a blast thus far. I've learned a lot running in a minimal prep fashion. I didn't have any notes or journal in front of me for this entire session. I referenced them once midway through, but I find in the middle of running a session I can barely read text on a page. It's quite freeing running something straight from your head, as long as you have a solid foundation of the stats of the session. This is why running a simple system like OSC or Shadowdark is so great. You don't have to think about overly complicated rules or figure out how many actions someone has left on their turn. It's just pure narrative storytelling. Once again, thank you so much for listening. If you found this video entertaining, leave a like, drop a comment below how this could inspire your game, or just tell us about some cool stories that you've had role-playing. Feel free to check out thedelvercollective.com for more RPG stories and tips and tricks for game masters. 2 more sessions remain in the first phase of Xaxa River Valley. The sky darkens as the Earth Eater comes. Happy gaming.